if Lent is, right, this contemplation, if Lent is letting go of things so that we can be in conversation with God, we've had a hard year. We've had a really hard year. A hard year with a lot of quiet in it already. And if Lent is a season of quiet, I tend to think of it that way. Quiet on top of quiet, I don't know, can be hard. In fact, maybe that's another question for everybody. How does Lent this year feel different from other Lents? Or does it feel different? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't.
We can focus on Lent and thinking about giving things up more theologically during Lent, is that it gives me a different lens to look at being alone and being distanced from people, and trying to get out of my own head and into what God wants me to think about in these weeks, can be helpful.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, I'm finding some I don't know, richness from using this time of quiet as a way to I don't know, amplify Lent for me. I don't know. Okay. All right. I like thinking about Lent as a reset button. And I think maybe meditation, right? If we're going to borrow from other traditions, or not even borrow, inherit, share, right? Because we're such a multicultural world, right? Thinking about Lent as a recentering, or, you know, to borrow from technological metaphors, a reset button. I like, yeah, push go. All right. So COVID, Lent, letting go of things. We've had to do a lot of letting go. Okay, so here's where Jill Duffield comes in for me. As I said, her book takes us through Lent with very simple objects. And her point being, you know, these simple objects are all around us. These are the everyday. Lent is not something extraordinary, is not something outside of something everybody has access to. So the first week, and the only one we're sticking to as far as our order goes, is this one, dust. Because Ash Wednesday, for the obvious reasons, right? Because Ash Wednesday is such, I find, a powerful, and I think everybody, such an overwhelmingly powerful reset button. I mean, I really think of what Ash Wednesday is, just this. Very, very strong statement. And here are the words, right? Here are the words. I've got them on the screen from Genesis. These are the words we are repeated over and over in our heads when we associate, the words I associate most strongly with Ash Wednesday. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. I'm going to stop sharing my screen again, just to give those words a little space. I'm curious what people's associations with those words are.
I was just going to say, raised Catholic, Ash Wednesday was a really powerful day. And so I have these very vivid memories of the priest, putting the ashes on your forehead and saying that, and that sense of mortality. And I don't know, it was a very grounding sort of time and experience.
For me, it goes back ties back to the Genesis story, with God creating human beings out of the ground. And there's a James Weldon Johnson poem in which you see God's hands going down into the mud and forming this human being. And so this idea that those ashes connect us all the way back to the beginning always makes Ash Wednesday one of those services I never want to miss.
Yeah, I think the dust to dust concept, it really demands perspective. It demands that we look at what we're doing, how we're living, what we're spending our time focused on in a completely different way. And so the idea of letting go to me means letting go of some of the things that are totally occupying my mind and my life, and to focus on the things that are really important.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. When I said the words to my daughter last night, she said, "Oh, I always love those words. And they remind me," she said, "of one of the laws of physics." She said, no, their energy is never created or destroyed, or its corollary mass is never created or destroyed. And she's right.
She's also very young.
She's all, yes, I did say that.
She's right, but she has a different perspective.
She did. And Margaret, thank you for saying that. When she said that, I said, well, it's a little different when you're older.
No, that's lovely.
But it is hopeful. And I go, let's see, am I pushing the right button? There we go. So yeah, I go where Linda went, so I start with where Steve was, right? Or with, we're reminded like the resetness of those words, right? To remind us of what's important. But I like the whole verse, right? So there's the last two. I'm going to read the entire piece here that's in front of us from Genesis 3:19. "In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return." So we get the last two words, right? The last independent clause of that entire verse. But I love the word return, right? Reminding us that we're part of the earth, right? That we eat bread that also comes from the earth, that connectedness. I find that grounding, reassuring. And yeah, like Linda, then I go here, right? Because I think that's not even, I know absolutely that's part of our understanding, right? The word dust, what that verse from Genesis is referring back to, right? The words in the story that happened before we get to the words that we're all given on Ash Wednesday is, this verse that Linda was referring to from Genesis. "Then the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being." So I think, for me anyway, all those words are happening simultaneously. And I think that's, I don't know. They're all happening at the same time. I'm going to stop for a second before I shift gears again. I want to know if any of you have, if there are other, so going back to what Duffield's doing, she's taking ordinary objects, in this case, dust, and tying them to, she's picking words, obviously, that resonate, that are from the biblical text, that are from this tradition that we've inherited, that we live through. And I like how Easter and Lent are both things that we're active participants in. I like how Lent is a participatory, right, event. That we're drawing from this textual, this story, right? The story that we've inherited from the Bible, and that we keep on retelling in lots of different ways. And it means different things to us at different times. And that the Bible, right, keeps on touching down on the same reference point. Again, going back to Linda's point, that we were made out of the dust. God breathed life into us. And then just the recurring ways in which this idea keeps on getting woven again into the text. So that's a lot of talking from me, but are there I wanted to ask everybody else if there are other places in the Bible or other, for you, ways in which dust and its connection to that story makes meaning for you? I know it's a big open-ended question.
And just in my childhood, which was in this church, I don't remember us particularly talking about Lent at all. And of course, for Mary, that was before the 70s. So, but the only thing that I particularly remember is that spring was coming. And that if we talk about dust, we're talking about preparing the soil in the gardens. And it was a great time, not of mud, but of hope for what was coming. The days were getting longer, summer was coming. For me personally, the most important thing was pitchers and catchers were reporting to camp. and so it's sort of a hopeful time that's climaxed by the dogwoods and daffodils blooming in the south walk that you could see from the sanctuary. And so that's kind of my thought.
Thanks. Other touch points, either like in your experience with Lent, with dust as a object of, I don't know, focus, for other folks?
I'm remembering the scripture about when you go into someone's house, when the disciples are being sent out, if you go and you are not welcomed, shake the dust off your feet. And I'm trying to decide what that means in regard to Lent.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, no, Duffield had that verse as part of this week, and I didn't know what to do with it either. And her reading and my reading were very different from it, so I let it be, but I'm really glad you brought it up. She read it a couple different ways, but one of the ways she read it was to, again, be able to let go of what you want to let go of, or what you need to let go of. But yeah, she stopped on that verse as well. That's really cool that for you that resonates. Yeah, that was one of the things. So yeah, if you want to get Duffield's take on it, or I can send you a copy. Yeah, I don't know. I found that one difficult also.
This is Anne. I have heard that verse referenced by people who are in new church development as a verse of blessing for the fact that not every project will succeed. And sometimes you have to let that go and move on. So that goes with the release theme as well.
Thanks. That's cool.
Growing up, springtime and Lent was a time when traditionally we did a major house cleaning. And it was sort of that idea of letting go of all the stuff that had accumulated over the winter. And so that for us growing up, spring cleaning was a Lenten practice. My mother always started it about the time, and it might have been because in northern Indiana, that's when the weather changed and you could open the windows. Could have, as you said, we're connected to the earth. But there was that sense of letting go of stuff that had collected, that we knew we didn't need. And so to me, those two things have always kind of gone together. And I've not been as disciplined about the spring cleaning thing as I have matured. But I won't say got older, just matured. But to me, there's always been that phrasing, the letting go. When you said that was a touch point of what Lent is, letting go of stuff, but also letting go of feelings, emotions, things that have kind of backed up, harbored, stored. That it's time to let go and let God have them.
Yeah, thank you, Priscilla, for both of those. I love the spring cleaning metaphor, and that really ties nicely into what the verse Mary was remembering. But yeah, and sorry, and I didn't sort of like overtly say what you just said, which I really appreciate. So baked into the phrase "letting go," right? As a reworking of giving up, right? Is that right? What are the ideas, the resentments, the things that we're spending time thinking about that really are not the focus or should not be the focus of our lives? Yeah, absolutely. So yes, thank you. All right. Other thoughts? Okay, I am going to shift gears again. And go someplace completely different. If I can get my buttons to work. Ah, there we go. That's where I wanted to go. Okay, you're like, what? Okay. So I can't, or happily for me, when I read the Bible, when I read anything, right? I think this, I'm sure this is true for everyone, right? One story touches another story. One story references another story. We were just talking about how the Bible itself, right? A collection of books, one verse references another, right? You can't understand those words that are spoken on Ash Wednesday without having in the back of your mind what Linda was reminding us of from the earlier verses in Genesis. So, of course, my brain, like all of our brain, there's many books out there. And so this is a book I've been reading recently, happily, or a play I've been reading recently with some of my students, Our Town. And though I'm not teaching Sunday school class when I teach this play, gosh, I can't help but not. So I really can't help but not, or I try not to. So Thornton, just to remind everybody, so Our Town, right, was written by Thornton Wilder. It was written in 39. He wrote it about this idealized New England town, Grover's Corners, in 1901 in New Hampshire. What's remarkable about this play, again, I'm probably stating something everybody knows, but I just want to remind us all. It's a play that vehemently is a play with no props, right? No stage set, no nothing, no no elaborately painted sets, no balcony where Juliet, none of that, right? No illusions. There might be some folding chairs. I think there might be 2 bar stools with a piece of wood across them. Oh, and ladders, 2 ladders, and that's it. That's baked into the play. And the other thing that's baked into this play vehemently is the part of the stage manager, right? And the stage manager is a speaking part, right? That that right there. He to talk about the stage manager exists in the present, in the past, and the future simultaneously. He speaks to the characters. He knows what's going to come. He knows what's happened. And he speaks directly to the audience. So I don't know if I need to say much more than that about who the stage manager is, but yeah, there's a stage manager. And in this play, somewhere toward the end of Act 2, here, I'll stop screen sharing because I'm going to read some bits from it. I can get there we go, that arrow. Okay, bye-bye screen share. So at the beginning of Act 2, he tells us, like you just saw on that slide, the play's divided into 3 acts. And he says the first act was called Daily Life. This act is called Love and Marriage. And then he tells us there's another act coming after this. I reckon you can guess what that's about. All right, so we know, there's no surprises in this play, or few. So the play's about these 2 families. And the families have young children. And in the second act, 2 of the young children get married. And at the beginning of the third act, we're at the top of a hill in a cemetery. And the stage is set with a group of chairs, one of which is occupied by the mother of one of the families. We see somebody we know who we saw earlier in the play who has died. And in the middle is one empty chair. And this is what the stage manager tells us going into that act. He says about this place, this is certainly an important part of Grover's Corners. It's on a hilltop, a windy hilltop, lots of sky, lots of clouds, often lots of sun and moon and stars. You come up here on a fine afternoon and you can see range on range of hills. Awful blue they are, up there by Lake Sunapee and Lake Winnipesaukee. And way up, if you've got a glass, you can see the White Mountains and Mount Washington, where North Conway and Conway is. And of course, our favorite mountain, Mount Monadnocks, right here. And all these towns lie about it, Jaffrey and East Jaffrey and Peterborough and Dublin. And there, quite a ways down, is Grover's Corners. So that's the beginning of the third act. We still don't know whose funeral we're attending, but we find out very quickly that it's the young bride who we saw married at the end of Act 2. This is 9 years later, we're told, and it's her funeral. And so she arrives, and this always happens in this play, and it's always done this way, from a flock, a host of black umbrellas. And she emerges from the black umbrellas in this white, long white dress with her hair tied in a white ribbon. She comes and she sits down in that empty chair, sort of dazed. She wants to go back. She realizes she can go back. And she asks everybody, she begs, I want to go back. And they say, don't do it, don't do it. And we don't know why, but she's insistent. And she says, well, I want to go back to a special day. And they say, well, don't do that. Pick an ordinary day, or a day that's a little special. And so she goes back to her 12th birthday. She walks back to the house and she can see it happening. She sees her mother preparing breakfast like she did every morning. We see this in earlier acts in the play, her mother and other mothers preparing breakfast. So we're re-seeing what we've already seen them do. And we see her father come back from a conference at his alma mater, having just given a speech, and the mother laying out the presents for her daughter. And this is what, and Emily sees all these details, one on top of each other. She's watching this day unfold in front of this morning, just this little morning. And it gets increasingly difficult for her. And she says, I can't bear it. They are so young and beautiful. Why did they ever have to get old? Mama, I'm here. I'm grown up. I love you all, everything. I can't look at everything hard enough. And then she goes on. It keeps on getting harder for her. And she says this to her mother. Oh, Mama, just look at me 1 minute as though you really saw me. Mama, 14 years have gone by. I'm dead. You're a grandmother, Mama. I married George Gibbs, Mama. Wally's dead too, Mama. His appendix burst on a camping trip to North Conway. We felt just terrible about it. Don't you remember? But just for a moment now, we're all together, Mama. Just for a moment, we're happy. Let's look at one another. Well, it's just, she can't. She can't watch. She realizes the people, the dead were right. And she says this to the stage manager. I can't go on. It goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. And then Emily breaks down sobbing, the lights dim. And she goes on speaking to the stage manager. And she says, I didn't realize. So all that was going on and we never noticed. Take me back up the hill to my grave. But first, wait, one more look. Goodbye. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Grover's Corners, Mama and Papa. Goodbye to the clocks ticking and Mama's sunflowers and food and coffee and new iron dresses and hot baths and sleeping and waking up. Oh, Earth, you're too wonderful for anybody to realize you. She looks toward the stage manager and she asks him abruptly, do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute? So I don't know, or maybe I do know. That seems to me very Lenten. That for me really spoke in some of the same ways that Jill Duffield's book and this task of thinking about dust as a way to think about what I want to say to God, what I want to say to myself. I don't know. Maybe I should stop there for a second and ask the rest of you, reactions to Thornton Wilder's play. Are there other texts that for you resonate in similar ways?
I just finished reading a book called The Midnight Library. I don't know if anybody else has read it, but I won't ruin the book for you, but the story is basically about a person who tries to commit suicide and ends up in what is called the Midnight Library, where there are an infinite number of books, and every book is her life story, as it would have been if she had made one different decision or one different turn in her life. And she can go visit any of those lives she wants to. And she does. And her final resolution, I won't spoil it for people, but her final resolution speaks to this concept of how you miss your life as you're living it, and the choices that you make unconsciously or consciously every day affect the trajectory of your life to the extent that you can never go back to the old trajectory. And that book resonates with me around Lent. So I would highly recommend it to anybody that hasn't seen it.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I think there are a lot of ways into Lent. And I mean, books that ask us to, oh, Cleve said he liked it too. Oh, cool. I'm looking at the chat. Help us re-see things. The Bible doesn't stop talking to us there. That's what I wanted to say. Whether it's through the Midnight Library or whether it's through Thornton Wilder's play, which, written in 1939 is still speaking to me.
Jennifer, I don't have a particular text. That was beautiful, though. I want to read Our Town again. But I think just listening to what everybody's been saying, I think letting go lets you focus on the present. I think what you're saying that's very poignant. I mean, yeah, do we really notice each other or nature or whatever? But basically, it's like, I think Mike was saying, your head is spinning with all these other things, and it's really what you choose to focus on. So to the extent you let go of all that and focus on God and, what he wants you to see and do. But that is a discipline that I guess that's a Lenten discipline and should be throughout the year, but to be present in the moment. I mean, easier said than done, but.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, and it's hard. Yeah, just to echo what you're saying, Margaret, it's really hard.
Right.
And maybe that's why we've got worked into Lent. So to give credit for what I've been throwing rocks at, the practice of fasting, right, or letting go things. I mean, part of those traditions do come from a way to focus yourself. But I feel like sometimes the intent gets lost. But yeah, it's hard to focus on what is most valuable or to reassess. And I guess here's another word that I think of more from a Catholic tradition, but the idea of Lent is a penitent time, right? Penance. And the idea of Lent is a time to re-examine, or as Mike was saying, the idea that you re-examine some of the choices you made. Were they the right ones? Were they the wrong ones? And maybe Lent is a time to, course correct.
And there's, Jennifer, I noticed that this week's word on the banner outside church is recommit.
Oh.
And so in a way, Haig's book and Wilder's play talk to us about Lent leading into Easter. So if we're leading toward that moment of true life triumphing over death, it's what kind of life, and readying ourselves to know what we want to do with that life by letting go of the things that aren't where we want to be.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I didn't see the banner. Perfect. Other associations for other folks? Release. Anne, you want to give us any backstory on that?
Actually, Mary Pratt and Mary Hill and I've been kind of as a team coming up with words to lead us through Lent. And so I don't know if there's a particular backstory, but I think that perhaps we were the relationship of recommit and release are there. That, you know, if you recommit, you can't keep everything you have and recommit. You have to be able to release. So the hope is that those words walking through will help us walk through Lent. There will be in your inboxes on Monday, I believe, each week of Lent, something coming to help you think on those words and reflect. And Mary Hill really has been the driver of this, so I should defer to her.
It's been a team effort. I think it is really, really hard to just appreciate the preciousness of life all the time. There's just a lot of practical stuff that has to be done in life too. And so how to take these simple things like preparing dinner or, getting the house clean or whatever it may be, and turning it into something that's a higher calling, that's something that relates somehow to who we are as human beings and made in the image of God. I always admire people who are able to do that. I find it really hard. And so it makes me doubly grateful for memory, because it is really in my memories that I can go back and appreciate some of the preciousness that I don't appreciate in the moment.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it is really hard. And I guess that's what and thank you for echoing that, like the meals prepared, we see that with Wilder. I'm thinking what Priscilla said about cleaning the house, right? There's so much stuff. And I'm thinking, the traditions borrowing from like things we can learn from. I'm thinking about the practice of mindfulness, right? Borrowing from other disciplines, which is about focusing on the now, on this moment. So hard to do. I am not a successful meditator, at all. So I admire the practice, but it's, running, right? Reading poems. That's as close as I get to it. But yeah, to echo Mary's point, it's so hard. Final thoughts about books or Lent. I don't want to cut anybody off if somebody wants to add something.
Just wanted to add on that for a second. Sorry, I got here late, but you remind me of this famous meditator in Mexico, but she's from Australia. Her name is Isha Jude. And I don't have something specifically to point about her, but she's quite famous in Latin America. And what she does is she has a method for several times during the day, kind of like Deepak Chopra, to go in and stuff like that. But for me as mom with kids, what I did is I put in my phone alarms that say so it's like when I was like in a non program in high school, they will stop anything to do the Angelos at lunchtime. So at least I put alarms throughout the day when it's like noon or 5 o'clock. And if nothing else, I have to stop whatever I'm doing to stop the alarm, and then at least go for 10 seconds in and just connect, like you were saying, like spiritually connect. It's been very helpful. But I would love if you could put the text that you read here so I can read it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for reminding us of that. Yeah, no, I love, and I'm so sorry we've lost the tradition really of the ringing of the bells for the different prayers of the day as a way collectively, communally, right? I mean, that's not a tradition I grew up with, right? I did not grow up with that tradition, but that's what Danielle is talking about, right? But on a communal level, and so just the corporateness of that. Sorry, somebody wanted to add something. Priscilla?
Well, many years ago, I did a workshop in Celtic spirituality by a woman who was on the faculty at Pittsburgh Seminary. And she worked with us on things like, and I was a mother of young children at the time, so it resonated that in household tasks, sort of echoing what Jill has done with this, is that she said, when you're folding clothes, you think about who's going to wear that item of clothing and pray for that person. She taught us when and I still do this, you know, when you're making coffee in the morning, as you put each scoop of coffee in, with each scoop, you pray for somebody. So it takes that. Now I have to tell you, every once in a while, I get coffee that's a little on the strong side because I've lost count and I'm still praying. But she helped see that in those ordinary things of the day, that there's a way to bring in that spiritual reflection time. And I still find myself doing that when I'm, you know, folding clothes or making coffee, or she introduced us to stop sign prayers, so that every time you come to a stop sign, you use that moment to think about somebody. And that has been a useful, while it's not specifically to Lent, but it is sometimes a Lenten practice that I sort of reclaim more intentionally during Lent to kind of restart my spiritual practices year.
Thanks, Priscilla. That's lovely. Yeah, again, the everydayness, as you said, that really connects well with what Duffield's trying to give us as a hook, or the function of the bells or the alarm on Daniela's phone. Something small and easy to pull us out of the scatter and help us breathe in and breathe out and recenter. All right.
Jennifer, I'll offer for those who will be joining us next week, one more very mundane and ordinary item. We'll be focusing on bread next week. You know me, I'll spend time in scripture. So the two places I'm going to go will be the Exodus story when manna is given, and also the John, I am the bread of life verses. So if anybody wants to read ahead, feel free. But we'll once again, and I don't think we're going to have to give up bread. Because that would be a real hardship for me. I was the one who never understood why bread and water was such a punishment until my mother explained it wasn't that kind of bread.
Thanks, Linda. All right, just to circle back, and I just want to give you another playbill from our town. I don't know if everybody knows, the first one, right, was covered with stars, right, echoing what the stage manager had to say about the graveyard up at the top of the world in the heavens. Many other playbills, and this one actually is from Weston Playhouse in Vermont. I found when I was trolling the internet looking for good playbills, but many of them, most of them, set the characters up against this large moon, right? And there's another line from our town where the kids are talking about receiving a letter, or somebody receiving a letter that was, you know, the address, my street, my town, my state, my country, the earth, the universe, the galaxy, and just, you know, and then at the end of it, the girl said to the little boy, and it got there anyway. Just so that we see that, right, placing us in that larger universe. Wilder makes gestures to that over and over again. So circling back to, you know, Genesis, I feel like this play places us in the whole circle of our lives. It begins at dawn, right? Wilder opens his play, the sun is coming up, the rooster has crowed, the doctor has just returned from helping two twins being born into the world, right? That's how it begins. It begins with dawn and birth, and the rooster, right? Do we need any more signifiers? And then the ending of the play closes with evening, right? The sun is going down, the day has been full, and the stage manager says, well, maybe now, folks need to rest and it's time to go to bed. So it's a dawn to dusk play. It's daily life to death. I like the full circle of it very, very much. And so I want to take us out with one more poem or one more text. This is one you're probably not familiar with. It's by a poet named Alice Oswald. She's British. She's from Devon, southwestern England. These days she teaches at Oxford. She's a classicist by training, but she's also and she's also a master gardener. And she wrote this poem, which to me also sort of spoke to some of the things we're talking about. So I thought I'd give it a read. Oops, I just pushed the wrong button. Darn it. There we go. All right, it's called Body. This is what happened. The dead were settling in under their mud roof, and something was shuffling overhead. It was a badger treading on the thin partition. Bewildered were the dead, going about their days and nights in the dark, putting their feet down carefully and finding themselves floating. But that badger, still with the simple heavy box of his body needing to be lifted, was shuffling away alive, hard at work, with the living shovel of himself. Into the lane he dropped, not once looking up, and missed the sight of his own corpse falling like a suitcase toward him, with the grin like an open zip, as I found it this morning. And went on running with that bindweed will of his, went on running along the hedge and into the earth again, trembling, as if in a broken jug, for one backward moment, water might keep its shape. So that's a gift from Alice Oswald. But it seemed to speak to us again about where we are and what thinking about dust might do for us this week in Lent. So I look forward to next week. I'm so glad all of you were here with us today. Linda will teach us next time about bread, and then Cleve will follow with coins. So anyway, thank you for everybody participating. Thank you for all your thoughts. I know it's a hard conversation to have, but I really feel, well, I really appreciate everybody sharing their stories.